once again to IBN Spotlight. Our guest today is Urvashi Vaid. She is the Executive Director of the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. I would like to welcome her to our studios. She is an attorney in Washington and also is one of the leading spokespersons for the promotion of public education for discrimination against the gay and lesbian community. Urvashi, what exactly does the task force do?
The National Gay and Lesbian Task Force is a civil rights organization that works in Washington, D.C. to do lobbying in Congress and throughout the federal government to end discrimination against lesbians and gay men. We also house a variety of educational programs where we do research and put out reports and talk about the problems of discrimination and prejudice that gay people in this country and around the world face.
But how is the discrimination any different from that of any other minority group?
Well, discrimination falls into the same kinds of categories as discrimination against women, for example, or discrimination by race. In other words, we as gay people are discriminated against in the employment context. We experience housing discrimination. We are often denied custody of our own children by the court systems. Our relationships, as committed as they might be, are not legally recognized in this country. So those are the kinds of examples of discrimination. Until very recently, immigration laws in this country forbade anybody who was gay from even visiting. That was changed last year. And there's a variety of other kinds of discrimination. So in some ways, in the sense that we experience employment or housing or other kinds of discrimination, it's similar. But I think what distinguishes anti-gay and lesbian prejudice is that people do not understand us. They feel like they have never met most people imagine that they have never met a gay person in their whole life. Certainly there's a lot of religious and cultural prejudice that we all grew up with against lesbians and gay men.
But as you are an Indian and coming from a culture like India, did you find it harder to grow up in this country? What were the problems you faced?
Well, I think that my experience is quite typical for a lot of Indians whose families emigrated to this country. My family came here when I was 8 years old, and so I've grown up most of my life in this country. I'm an American citizen at the moment, and
you've been educated here.
I've been educated here. I feel bicultural in some ways and quite westernized in other ways. And I think the problems that I had as a child growing up, an Indian growing up in America, were, on the one hand, my family had expectations of me to be a traditional Indian girl or a traditional Indian woman, and I could not meet those. And on the other hand, here was a culture in which I was always viewed as, well, you're Indian, you're different. I mean, my name, my face, everything, and I'm proud of it. I'm very proud to be Indian. And I was raised with a great deal of identification and pride in my heritage. But it's a dislocating feeling. It's a feeling of bridging both cultures. And I know...
And not knowing where you really belong to.
Exactly.
Have you come in contact with a lot of Indians who live here, who are gay and lesbians, and what number or how should they come out and, say that they are lesbians?
Well, homosexuality is so stigmatized in every society, including American society, that many people hide their sexual orientation, even if they are leading gay and lesbian lives. So it's very hard to get an accurate number. In this country, the Kinsey Institute in Indiana is the pioneer in studies of sexual behavior and has concluded that approximately 10% of the American population is homosexual.
I see.
I don't know what the comparable percentage would be in India, and I wonder if anybody has done studies of sexual behavior in India who could and that those would be the studies we would need to look at.
Would you like to work towards it and try and start grassroots organizations as you have done here? What do you see the future as to your goal, your goal and your work that you have done here, how it could be done in India?
Well, I think our goal is quite global and quite large, and it will take more than my lifetime to accomplish. I'm certainly going to make my contribution towards it. And that goal is to create a society in which a person's sexual orientation simply does not matter, in which a person is accepted for who they are, regardless of their homosexual or heterosexual orientation. Today, the world handles sexuality in a very bizarre way, I think. I mean, I think people are, well, I don't think, the fact is that people are discriminated against in the most blatant and extreme ways for our sexual orientation.
Do you personally come across a lot of people who discriminate against you and
certainly
their attitudes change?
I've certainly experienced discrimination in the form of walking down the street and being harassed. I mean, now some of that comes at me as a woman. Violence against women is a huge problem.
You have also done some work for battered women and violence against women. Do you get a lot of Indians?
Well, we both know that the problem of violence against women is not limited to this society.
Right.
It is certainly a huge problem in India, and the second-class status of women is a problem the world over,
right,
which the women's movement has done a great deal to change. So yes, I worked a lot in that issue 15 years ago, and in this country in different grassroots organizations. And I'm very excited by the news that I get from the Indian women's movement about the good work that they have been doing to raise that issue in India.
The other question is, in India one notices a very arm-in-arm culture where you see two men walking along and heads don't turn and say, you know, they're necessarily homosexuals. Do you think this is a cultural difference, or there are latent homosexuals as well there?
Oh, I definitely think it's a cultural difference, and I think we find that in Europe too, where there's a great deal of affection among people of the same sex, and it does not mean anything sexual. But in this society, America tends to sexualize a lot of relationships, and so I think that those kinds of interactions are viewed with suspicion, when in fact they are just a sign of friendship and love.
What do you feel about AIDS and how the issue of AIDS is being looked into in India?
AIDS is a worldwide epidemic, and it is, I am sure, spreading in India because it is a disease that is transmitted through blood-to-blood contact or through intimate sexual contact. People who engage in unprotected sexual contact can be unknowingly transmitting the virus or receiving the virus.
And so you feel public education is very important? Public
education is critical, and I am alarmed to see that the Indian government has yet to embark on a serious AIDS educational campaign. Now, certainly the experience of this country, the experience of African countries, the experience of Latin American countries, the experience of European countries ought to provide a model for the Indian government for how such an educational campaign can be devised and developed. I think we will have to develop our own culturally specific AIDS education campaign. We can't just take what's been done in America and transfer it to India. We have to look at...
But do you feel that AIDS is rampant in India now?
I think that AIDS is undoubtedly a problem in India, and I'm certainly hearing more about it in the Indian press, but I think people are pretending it doesn't exist. And to some extent, that pretending happens in America too. The government in this country, even though more than 120,000 people have died, even though approximately 1 million are estimated to be infected with the HIV virus, the government in this country has still thrown only a drop in the bucket towards AIDS research and education and prevention. The government has reacted with a lot of prejudice because in this country, the majority of people who have been diagnosed are gay or bisexual men. Worldwide, the problem is a heterosexual epidemic.
Right.
I mean, and people gloss over that fact, and they tend to see AIDS as a problem of the type of person who gets it rather than the type of behavior that gets it. I mean, if you're engaging in certain kinds of behavior, you are at risk. It doesn't matter who you are.
It is, right. You have also worked with prisoners and fought for their rights and discrimination against AIDS. What is the kind of work that you did with them?
I worked for the American Civil Liberties Union. I'm a lawyer, and when I practiced law, I worked on prisoners' rights cases which challenged conditions of confinement in prisons in this country to try to improve the delivery of medical care, the delivery of educational programs. Because because under the U.S. Constitution, even though one is incarcerated and has committed a crime, one is entitled to be treated as a human being.
Right.
And I mean, there's a great value in this political system, and that is in the U.S. Constitution. I firmly believe in that notion of the civil liberties and the Bill of Rights.
Right.
It's a time right now, though, in America where that very fundamental tenet of American constitutional law is being threatened by the Supreme Court.
Would you like to say anything for the gay and lesbian community in India, or any message that you would like to give anyone who's watching the show, where they can reach you, or to how to get out of being a latent homosexual?
Well, I guess the message that I would like to share with people is that there is no shame in being who you are. That there are lots of lesbians and gay men who are Indians or South Asians, broadly defined, and that we are leading happy lives, lives in which our families are understanding and accepting more and more each year, if not entirely right at the beginning.
Right.
And there is no shame in living your life openly and proudly. If I can be a beacon of hope to people who are living their lives in the closet, then I feel that I will have accomplished a great deal.
And do they have to contact any particular hotlines? Do you have facilities for that?
We personally do not at the task force, since we're a political organization
Right.
that works in the political process. But I would urge anybody who needs advice to contact and try to get in touch with the gay community in their area.
Right.
There are switchboards, gay and lesbian switchboards, hotlines, community centers, crisis centers. There are AIDS information lines for those people who would like more information about AIDS. The government runs AIDS information lines in this country. And they're anonymous, so one doesn't have to.
One is protected
Yeah.
if they want to be.
But it's really important that people not feel isolated from each other. Just
And I
because
think education is the only way to get them out of it.
education and visibility. I'm very appreciative to be invited on this kind of program, because I think that the Indian community in this country should not pretend that we, gay people, gay Indians, do not exist.
Right.
We do exist, and we're part and parcel. We're part of the fabric of Indian life in this country and in India, and we're part of every Indian family.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Urvashi. It was a pleasure speaking with you. I wish you the very best with your work, and I hope you do go to India and promote your message and educate the Indians there as well.
Thank you.
You so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Goodbye, and see you next week again on Spotlight.